This is the part I agree, is that homework.
So, good morning, everyone. We finally resolved the technical issue. Welcome to the CSW side event on harnessing and leveraging the power of citizen-generated gender data for strengthening and transforming gender data systems and institutions. I lost my breath there for a minute. So anyway, so thank you and for taking time, for choosing this side event to be with us and discuss citizen data. We also welcome those who are also connected online. We see more than, I think, 40 plus participants who are virtually connected. So this is obviously a hybrid event and looking forward to an active participation. I know we are running late, so without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Papasek, the Chief of the Research and Data Section of UN Women, and also sits as one of the co-chairs of the Collaborative on Citizen Data together with UN Statistics Division. So over to you, Papa.
Thanks very much, Jessa. And just to correct, I'm one of the nominal co-chairs, but she really is the one doing the work. So just extending my greetings to all of you, and welcome to this important event on that the title that Jessa just mentioned, which is a mouthful. So no. So we're really pleased to host this event, both in person and online, and really to allow for inclusive participation and lively events. Halfway through the SDGs, as we all know, we must acknowledge that we've made progress, right? So, but we also need to recognize that there are still persistent challenges that remain, particularly towards gender equality. At the midpoint of the SDGs, about half of the SDG 5 targets are moderately or severely off track, and over 1/3 have either seen no movement or regress below the 2015 baseline. Gender data gaps are another persistent problem, and I think basically it really contributes, I think, to this challenge that we have. We've made progress in this area. Since 2016, we've doubled the amount of data available to monitor all SDG targets, gender-related SDG targets. But despite those efforts, we still have critical data gaps, both in terms of geography, the timeliness of the data, issues related to disaggregation, and so forth. And this really hinders our ability to accurately measure progress and inform policy. But what we've seen is also that there are solutions. There are solutions if we look in the right places. Engaging citizens, including the most vulnerable in data collection and use, is one area of immense potential, both to generate new data and insights, but also to use the data to make advances. Citizen data, which needs no introduction to this group here today, can shed light in all areas, including sensitive and underreported issues. Partnerships among state institutions, academia, private sector, civil society, non-governmental organizations, women's advocates, research bodies, and so on, is really paramount. And collaborative efforts can enhance trust and accountability. It can accelerate progress towards gender equality and the empowerment of women by holding institutions, governments, and organizations accountable. To this end, the Collaborative on Citizen Data was established last year following a decision of the UN Statistical Commission to provide a space to share knowledge and experiences, to foster collaboration across different communities, identify potential conceptual and methodological gaps, and address capacity needs, including on quality assurance. Since 2022, we've held 2 expert group meetings, and the second expert group meeting essentially resulted in the creation of the Copenhagen Framework on Citizen Data, So this framework was developed and presented to the UN Statistical Commission at its session 3 weeks ago. The framework, which you will hear about very shortly, outlines, amongst others, the objectives of producing citizen data, the types of initiatives on citizen data collection, and the participation of citizens in the data collection process. As the collaborative refines the framework, we're really committed to engaging all relevant stakeholders within the national and international data ecosystem. 3 weeks ago at the Statistical Commission, we consulted with the statistical community. Today, it is your turn. We would like to solicit inputs and feedback from you, the CSW community, both on the content and the implementation of the framework going forward. We seek to explore the feasibility and applicability of the framework, identify elements necessary to foster an enabling environment for citizen data, and gauge interest in joining and contributing to the collaborative. Your insights and contributions will be important as we work towards refining the framework, broadening outreach and partnerships, and maximizing the impact of our collective efforts. So I encourage really an active participation and constructive dialogue throughout this session, as together we strive to harness the power of citizen data for a more gender equitable and sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Papa. Thank you so much for setting the stage and likewise calling everyone for this collaborative effort. We do have a collaborative of citizen data, but it will not succeed without each and everyone's voices coming into play. So this is something that is co-shared, co-owned with and every one of the people in this room, and likewise as well as with other communities. So I know, Papa, that you might have to leave at some point. Or yes, I'm just excusing Papa. I mean, I know that in the original program, he will be with us the entire day, the entire event. However, there is some other equally important situation that he has to attend to, particularly making women and girls counted and visible in the gas situation. So
thank you.
Speak to Papa. Good luck. So that being said, now we now go to the second part of this event. We do now present, as Papa has been talking about, the framework of citizen data, which has started back in November 2022 as part of the discussions. I now present the other half of the chairpersonship of the collaborative from the UN Statistics Division, Hao Yi-Chen.
Thank you so much, Jessa. Thank you, Papa. Thanks everyone for coming. I'll spend a few minutes on the framework, and then I'll also leave some for Francesca. She'll talk about the next steps in review. Our roadmap. So what's in the framework? Before I talk about it, Papa already mentioned about the steps we've taken to move towards the framework. But why do we need one? In the initial meeting we had in Bangkok, 2002, in November, when we started talking about the framework and talking about citizen data, we realized that we need to have a common understanding among all of us. All of us means national offices, civil society organizations, we have academia, and we also have a human rights institute. So we were talking about different things. So that's why we said, okay, let's first agree among ourselves what we're talking about, and before we move ahead together. So that's why we decided to start with the framework and to conceptualize it and help us moving forward together with a common understanding. So what's in the Copenhagen framework? It is available online for consultation. It contains 4 parts. The first is the framework. What is data in our community? What does it mean? And I'll touch on that. And we have 10 principles about citizen data, and then we have a set of enabling environment that really help countries, different communities to have a sustainable coordinated production and use of citizen data. And then we have a roadmap. So what do we mean? I mean, how do we define citizen data in this conceptual framework in the Copenhagen framework? we place a big emphasis on the sufficient engagement of citizens and throughout different stages of data value chain. Especially, we focus on the design and the collection stage that really saying that citizens have to have a say on the design on the data collection, also have a say on how their data are being used and being stored. And then we also really had to promote or encourage citizens, civil society organizations, community-led organizations initiate the data collection. So that's what we're talking about citizen data. And how do we find engagement, participation? What does it mean by participation? Is having a meeting and informing everyone sufficient engagement of citizens or not? So we had a lot of discussion around that and how exactly is happening in communities. If we have a meeting with community leaders from the government or from the communities, and we have the local government, will the community leaders or community members empowered enough to speak up? So these are discussions that we have had in the past, and we borrowed the idea of citizen participation letters of citizen participation from urban planning, where all the citizens and communities should be part of the urban planning and economic development later on, and then we brought it to the data. So we have 5 steps of the levels of citizen participation, from less engaging, insufficient, to the most empowering, the most engaging side, for citizens lead their own data collection. We also have a set of principles, and these might look familiar to some of you because we borrowed and these were adapted from other principles that have been working in the data field, including official statistics. So we have the fundamental principles for official statistics. We have the principles for citizen science that have been there. I think about 10 or 5 years ago, and then there was the human rights approach to data. So we brought all this together and put a huge emphasis on what are the driving principles should be data. We also have a set of enabling environments. As I mentioned, we talk about the whole of society approach, not only to the implementation of SDGs, for example, for the 2030 agenda, but also for the voluntary side. And how do we really work on the practice side, both from the NSOs and CSO side? How do we build trust, which is immensely important for citizen data to thrive? And what about the laws and regulations? The laws and regulations about opening up to civil society organization data from the official side, but also laws and regulations that guarding the privacy, confidentiality, make sure there's no harm to citizens for the data that we collected, not being targeted for discrimination. I will talk about data governance mechanism and institutional arrangements and statistical and technical infrastructure that are inclusive. And of course, data quality has always been center of discussion. But we have a lot of discussion on what is fit for purpose. So it depends on the objective, what kind of quality assurance framework we should be having for citizen data. That will be different from the quality assurance framework we've been using very frequently for official statistics. And funding. So we talk about the traditional, the funding for the NSOs, National Offices for Official Statistics, they are from the government. But for civil society organizations, it's not always possible to have support from the government, and sometimes they don't want to have the support from the government. So how do we really make sure the funding is sustainable to support data thrive? So yeah, we do have a roadmap for the implementation. Talk about working with partners, finalize the framework implementation. I'm not going into details, and then we are coming back to. So about 2-3 weeks ago, we were at the Statistical Commission, so we brought this, as Papa mentioned, to the Commission as a draft conceptual framework, and then we are to the Commission in March next year, and then there's implementation. We will be having July 2020 this year. Focusing on a lot. My hearts are moving. So we will be talking about discussed a lot, and then yes, to the commission, and then implementation. So just a couple words, maybe one word about the collaborative. So all of this would not be possible without the collaboration and the partnership among all of us. And working in the community, especially special thanks to the steering committee member who have been really putting so much effort and into this framework. And we really hope this collaborative working platform to get everyone to share national experiences, also for us to bring all these experiences into guidance and to support others. So, and then also to mobilize all the stakeholders, all of us together. As I mentioned, the draft framework is open for consultation. It is online, and please bring your input in there. We are open for consultation in the next 10 to 12 months. If you're interested also to test and pilot the framework with us, with your work, with your data, and the collection activities in the communities, with the organizations, please reach out to us. And also we send out monthly newsletters with events on announcement and share good experiences that citizens about data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Howie. I think a couple of things here. Thank you for succinctly presenting the conceptual framework. I know that it is such a rich document. I think, especially from our discussants who have now been quite familiar with the conceptual framework, but likewise on the second part, that acknowledging that this is basically an output of more of a group of a collaborative output. So just to also say on this last point, your voice counts. So it's not just the consultation, that we are also encouraging you to join us in this finalization, hopefully, or refinement of the framework. But also, please, you are all welcome to join us in this collaborative. Please join us in this journey as we make sure that that we are able to basically work on citizen data together. So that being said, if ever you have specific questions for Howie, I request you to just park it towards the plenary discussion on the question and answer portion. And for those who are also joining us online, please do type in your questions on the chat. Thank you. Now, going to the panel discussion, we do have 6 panel discussants, and 2 of them are joining us remotely. Unfortunately, in as much as they would like to be here, circumstances didn't only enabled them to join us virtually. So the first 2 discussants will be coming in, and then the four are already here in this room. So for the first one, I will just introduce each panelist as I go through each of the questions specifically for them. So we are joined by Plan International. So Jacqueline Verinetti, she's the from the Research and Learning of Plan International. So with the citizen data, as mentioned by Howie, as part of the enabling environment, a whole of society approach is necessary for inclusive data. It requires changes in mindset and power structure within the broader national data ecosystem. So a specific question to Jacqueline here is, can you share what has been your learning experience or challenges when applying a whole of society approach when producing or using citizen data on equality for girls and boys in particular? If there is one practical advice also that you can share with the group to ensure that users of the citizen data framework follows a whole of society approach, what will that be and why? So over to you, Jacqueline, and welcome to this side event.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. Unfortunately, my colleague Debbie was unable to make it. So from our perspective, Plan International is a member of the Leave No One Behind partnership that is run out of the International Center for Civil Society. And a number of our country offices are part of local country coalitions working on citizen data. What we've collectively learned through piloting and applying a whole of society approach on citizen data over the last 7 years in the Leave No One Behind partnership is that citizen data is a scalable approach. It can help addressing blind spots in official statistics. often lacking appropriate data to fully capture and describe the situation and needs of underrepresented groups. It helps us to understand the intersectional drivers of underrepresentation, especially those that are difficult to capture in quantitative data. And in Plans International's case, this is most relevant in relation to girls and young women. Data often does not recognize the key age and gender milestones that affect their development from birth to young adulthood, and therefore cannot speak to or address the issues or enablers affecting them at different times in their lives. The ongoing lack of recognition of their data as equally relevant data, as well as the lack of understanding and trust in it by official institutions in the past, is neither inclusive nor equitable and can be, in certain circumstances, dangerous. We are delighted that the ongoing advocacy efforts that have helped co-create the Global Citizen Data Collaborative, which has now drafted the Copenhagen Framework, will help us ensure that there is now a gate opener, making more and more governments take up citizen data, especially of girls and young women, in their national data sets over the years. As far as practical advice, as an organization, it's essential that we don't let the specific situations of girls and adolescents get lost in general statistics that usually group them with either women or children. Their experiences and challenges are unique, and understanding these differences is crucial for governments and decision makers to address their needs properly. In our Leave No One Behind coalitions, we have worked with others to achieve this. For example, in Malawi, we undertook citizen-generated data collection, focusing on social protection programs. This resulted in a report and 2 policy briefs, which have contributed to the signing of a memorandum of understanding with the Malawi National Statistics Office, because most of the citizen-generated data is not integrated in national data sets. And then in Kenya, the Leave No One Behind coalition has also been active in seeking proactive approaches to engaging government and stakeholders in realizing the SDGs. Some of the initiatives that have been undertaken include a voluntary national review in partnership with the SDG Kenya Forum, the United Nations Residence Coordinator's Office, and the State Department for Economic Planning, and an examination of the legal framework on public participation at national and country level to explore how it supports in the implementation of the SDGs. So that was very short and very brief, but we are delighted to be part of this and fully endorse the work that has come out of the Copenhagen Framework. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I know it's short, we have limited time, but thank you for those very concise as well as insightful points. Just basically highlighting those 2 points that you mentioned, that citizen data, the value of citizen data to ensure that we are able to count and make people who are underrepresented more visible, and likewise citizen data more as a gate opener to have more NSOs, to have more country examples like Malawi and Kenya demonstrate the value and the gains of working on citizen data. So that being said, I now go to the second panelist, Jose Vieira, who's also joining us virtually. He's the Executive Director for International Disability Alliance. So welcome, Jose. And my question to you, as Papa mentioned in his opening remarks, during the 55th UN Statistical Commission, we also had an in-person side event, and we were joined, we had the pleasure of having Pamela Molina of the World Federation of the Deaf as one of the speakers. And she underscored the fact that the deaf community are systematically excluded from censuses and surveys of national statistical offices due to lack of language translation that caters to the deaf community. And I must say, when she made that intervention, it was like an aha moment for some of the NSOs, that they didn't realize that they are systematically excluding persons with disability, and in that case, the deaf community, with regards to statistical operations, traditional operations. So for you, Jose, representing the community, what practical advice can you give to ensure that the implementation of the Copenhagen framework results to changes that will make marginalized populations, often left behind and excluded in official statistics, more counted or visible in policy or programmatic actions? Over to you, Jose, and welcome. Is he connected? Yes, Jose. Jose, are you trying to? Jose, you're muted, just in case. You're trying to speak now?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Jose.
Perfect. And apologies for that. I think I have my camera and mic on now. So
Yes.
again, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to participate in this very important event. Besides the great intervention from my colleague Pamela a couple of weeks ago, I really want to share one important experience from the field. My colleague Elizabeth Lockwood, who is going to be speaking soon, and I were in Bolivia last week. And another message that I can share along with what Pamela said a couple of weeks ago is that we attended a workshop on data and statistics with deaf community in Bolivia, indigenous people, women with disabilities, and in different constituencies within the disability community. And they all have agreed again in the need for more inclusive and accessible data and more space for organization of persons with disabilities to be involved in this discussion. It was amazing to see last week how many organizations of persons with disabilities are collecting data and how committed they all are to engaging in this citizen-generated data. It was amazing to see concrete examples in which actually governments and local administrations are relying on OPD's generated data to reach out to people with disabilities. It's amazing to see how registries of persons with disabilities within OPDs have far more information about persons with disabilities than official data, and that is just to say that we envisage a future in which citizen-generated data can become a perfect complement to the official data collection processes. But in any case, couple of points that I really want to share with you all today are more related to how we can ensure that collection, analysis, dissemination of data, it's inclusive and accessible for persons with disability. It is clear that the need of collecting data on persons with disabilities is well understood, but we all see that still there is a big gap between that political commitment about collecting data on persons with disabilities and the real action, the practicalities on how we want to collect data for persons with disabilities. And actually, for that to happen, for that practical component to happen, we would like to share a couple of concrete examples. Number one is we really need to invest further in developing the capacity of organizations of persons with disabilities around collecting data. I think there's a common responsibility and an open reflection on how we do more in terms of investing in developing the skills of organizations of persons with disabilities in collecting, analyzing, and advocating for more data. Number two is the clear recognition that organizations of persons with disabilities can also collect data and can also contribute to initiatives like the collaborative initiative on citizen-generated data. And number three, which for me is the most important thing, is the need to understand that one of the many reasons for some of the failures in including persons with disabilities in policies and programs is basically the lack of data. We clearly have seen a significant progress on some of our key advocacy agendas, like education, employment, or social protection, only when data on persons with disability has been properly collected and used for policy discussion and program design. So I would say that if we really need, or if we really want to achieve the SDGs, think of a post-2030 agenda more inclusive of persons with disabilities, data moving forward would be a key component of that more inclusive frameworks that we are thinking of in terms of sustainable development. In closing, I would say that we all have different responsibilities. Our responsibility as a disability community is to create the spaces for organizations and persons with disabilities to be engaged. We are investing significantly in alliance with organizations like CBM Global Disability Inclusion and many others in developing knowledge products about data and persons with disabilities. We are conducting different surveys to know the gaps around data and persons with disabilities, where we need to invest further. We are committed to advancing the national level discussion through similar exercise like the one I was sharing we did in Bolivia, how to bring this global tools and global achievements to real change at the national level. And finally, I think we are advancing quite positively in creating alliances and strategic partnership with those stakeholders that are working on data in general. We need to advocate for more data, but we also need to advocate for stakeholders to be more inclusive of persons with disabilities. We always remain committed to this cause, but at the same time, we have a very clear message to all of you. If we want to advance in including persons with disabilities, we need to be more inclusive of persons with disabilities, from designing to implementing and monitoring program and policies related to disability and data. It's no longer enough to say we want to collect more data of persons with or about persons with disabilities, but now we need to think how we are going to engage organizations of persons with disabilities in this fantastic journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think a few points from your intervention. We always say about inclusive data, and I think Jose, you have underscored the fact that it's not just more inclusive data, but also more inclusive and accessible data. We have to make sure that that's also something that is part of the discussion. And likewise, the 2 points that you mentioned in terms of investments and capacity for data collection, and likewise a clear recognition of the persons with disability community or other communities as well can also collect data. And I think this is just personally, I share that my mantra in life as well as in work in particular, that we should share and borrow strengths from and with each other. And I think that's the essence of your point when you mentioned that we have different responsibilities, and with that we have different strengths. And I think that's where official statistics and citizen data can share and borrow strengths from each other. Now, thank you, Jose. Now we go to the third speaker, Catherine Langenspin, sorry if I mispronounced your name. So she's co-chair of the European Parliament's Disability Intergroup and coordinator of the Greens EFA in the European Parliament Working Group on Gender Equality and LGBT IQ plus rights and sexual and reproductive health. So along the lines that that I have asked Jose, but this time particularly on data and statistics on the LGBTIQ plus statistics, particularly with intersectionality on persons with disability, they're often excluded in official statistics. So what practical advice can you give to ensure that the implementation of this Copenhagen framework results to changes that will make the community more counted and visible? Over.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think
good morning.
We can still say good morning. Thanks for inviting me. And Matt, Jose, we know each other, could speak to on persons with disabilities and how progressive a woman with disability, non-LGBTIQ group associated, let's say, is talking about that topic and target group. Let me intervene, or let me strengthen or presenting some fact from the European Parliament. I'm a member of the European Parliament since 2019, and intersectionality is a very important topic to us as Greens, and it's always a fight to get all the different groups in our reports, in our resolution, it's like we don't have to mention all these different groups, costs too much space on paper. It's not necessary to call everyone like Romani woman or gay persons or etc. There are groups and voices in the parliament. They don't see the importance, necessity of that. Same with, do we have to flag violence against women? We are all equal. That is not the narrative, but there are loud voices from white men and women. They don't see the importance of us. As stated before, it's nothing new, I will tell you. We have a lack of data. We have a lack of data, and data are important. They make us visible, that we are existing. And the topic, violence, lack of rights are visible. And data is a power to monitor, to change, and on EU level to hold member states accountable who are discriminated against the most, especially, anti-discrimination directive is still on hold, let's say, in the European Council, and that would be a huge step when the member states could adopt that. In the EU, we established several guidelines for the collection of equality data. In 2020, the EU published its first ever EU LGBTIQ equality strategy 2025, and we have the disability strategy where we mention intersectionality as well. So we are working on it. We have a commissioner for equality. She was really fighting. Helena Dalli, a great ally when it comes to LGBTIQ rights. She's from Malta, and Malta is, let's say, on that the most progressive country, I would say. And yeah, we hope that we will have in the next mandate a commissioner for equality again. In the strategy of the Fundamental Rights Agency and the European Institute for Gender Equality were assigned to provide member states with technical assistance and methodological support on the design and implementation of data collection exercises on LGBTIQ people, both on single and multiple grounds. In 2023, the agency will launch, or had launched, now 2024, last year, the third LGBTIQ survey, and that collected the experience of discrimination and hate crime, as well as the views and challenges faced by lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, and queer people in 30 countries. EU countries, Albania, North Macedonia, and Serbia, and 31 languages. The report of the Fundamental Rights Agency 2012-2019 was the biggest one conducted EU-wide. It also shows particular concerns on AI, artificial intelligence, and last week we adopted for the very first time on the globe the AI law. Mm-hmm. And algorithm are here a very important thing. We have the big elephants. They try to make money with hate crime, with hate words. Hate is their business model, let's say. How can we divide a society? And as loud as you are, aggressive voices. I TikToked a video yesterday on women's rights, and after 2 seconds, you get all the hate comments by white men. We must say that it is, sorry guys here in the room, it is a reality to us. In 2030, you published the guidance on the collection and use of data for LGBTIQ equality for member states to improve the collection of data disregarded by sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. When collecting these data, it's crucial not to conflate sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. For better comparison, the guidance gives definition and examples of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and so on. Example for sexual orientation, question could be, how would you currently describe your sexual orientation? A, B, C, D, or you don't have to mention it at all. We should mainstream information on that in all national and EU surveys. Member states are encouraged to collect more these kind of data and census large-scale surveys and administrative surveys. So far, Malta, I've mentioned it, is the only EU member state to have included a specific question on sexual orientation. Here, the EU guidelines emphasize on importance of data protection and the OHCHR's human rights-based approach on data. Any data collection effort should include the means for free, urgent and meaningful participation of relevant stakeholders, in particular the most marginalized population groups. By collecting data on these different groups, it's important to use community-appropriate terminology and ensure the data collection is culturally grounded. Nothing about us without us. Ask the people who are there on the table if there is a lack of people on the table. You don't ask us, you don't ask the people who we are talking about, then we should cancel the event on that. I do it. Sufficient budget, funding. We need money to support NGOs, people who are working on data. And here it's crucial the absence of regular collection of different groups' data through administrative sources or surveys. Member states should provide sufficient budgetary resources to collect such data every 4 to 5 years through a comprehensive national survey. And here there are the voices like, it's not important, we don't need that. Mainstream and an intersectional approach, I mentioned it before, in the collection and use of the different groups' data. We have to acknowledge the multiple layers of discrimination. It should aim to represent the diversity of this community. The need to improve outreach the LGBTIQ women. Within the LGBTIQ community, cisgender, endosex, gay men tend to be overrepresented in data collection. A specific effort should therefore be made to ensure the participation of other members of the community, specifically targeting the women of the LGBTIQ community, and to ensure that civil society organizations led by and focused on LGBTIQ women are involved in all parts of the dissemination process. As women with disability, I also want to stress disability as a factor when we talk about intersectionality. The data collection of persons with disabilities is nearly non-existing. We are not there. Yes. So there's still something worse than the lack of data when it comes to LGBTIQ. The data collection of persons with disability is non-existent and on EU level and needs absolute improvement. Our EU Parliament report on EU disability strategy asks for the collection of robust, disaggregated data broken down by type of disability, age, gender, and factors that are relevant to the monitoring of progress in the implementation of the CRPD, and to addressing the barriers faced by persons with disabilities in exercising their rights. The new strategy promises to develop a strategy for data collection, steer member states accordingly, and provide an analysis of existing data sources and indicators, including administrative data. And last point, my call is to keep the factor of disability always in mind. Always also regarding the collection of LGBTIQ data. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine, for that really insightful message. I think a few takeaways, as you mentioned, for this particular community, there is basically non-existent data, and that's also something that was raised in our side event last Thursday together with Francesca, that there were calls for how do we find LGBTIQ plus community, and that's where Francesca also said that to be honest, I don't see that happening in the next couple of years as far as official statistics is concerned, and that's where citizen data is there to already offer what is already existing from this on this data. And the second, nothing about us without us. As you said, we should have that political will. If there's nobody in the table that represents that community, we might as well not have that event as well. So I hear you with regards to that. And third, you mentioned about multiple layers of discrimination, and I think being exposed so much, for example, in the statistical community, whenever we talk about intersectionality, it's a lot of multiple levels of disaggregation. It's not simultaneous disaggregations, etc. When in fact, ultimately, it's multiple layers of discrimination intersecting inequalities. That's how the language should always be, because it's about the people. It's not about the variables that we should be that we should be producing. And then lastly, obviously, the point on funding, it is very much in line with the theme of CSW, strengthening institutions. How can we strengthen institutions without funding? So here. So thank you, Catherine. Over to you, Elizabeth Lapud, from the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities for sustainable development. So obviously, these are all discussions so far on an inclusive and well-functioning data governance system. I hope it's not aspirational, but rather more realistic in the coming years. So from your end, what do you think are the essential elements in a data governance mechanism that the country needs that will foster coordination, build partnership, particularly among the disability community, among the LGBTIQ+ community, or generally the marginalized community, national statistical offices, and other actors within the broader data ecosystem. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Great, thank you so much. I do work with persons with disabilities, so I will build on that, but I think what I'm talking about can be applied to many different underrepresented groups. So very much building on what's already been said, I think that persons with disabilities and their representative organizations and others need to be involved in the data value chain, especially from the beginning, in a very collaborative manner. And one example I learned very recently is in the Dominican Republic that deaf people were missing from the census. So deaf people were trained to be enumerators, and with sign language interpreters went to deaf households. And this was the first time this has ever been done. And they were able to collect data that traditionally had been left out completely. And this is a wonderful practical example of something that can be replicated with other groups. And building on that, the recognition of citizen-generated data that we're talking about here is especially important in emergencies, humanitarian situations, pandemics. We have examples of this from our work that the government did not provide information, accessibility, resources, even food in some cases during the COVID pandemic. And organizations of persons with disabilities stepped in and provided this and complemented. And I think that's something that is recognized, should be recognized more, the role of these organizations, and to really value and recognize this work. Also, harmonizing data between ministries in governments and then internationally, no matter what the group is. This is very important to compare, not only within the country, within years of different data collections, but in other countries. And what we find, we always promote the Washington Group Shortset, because this is something you can use very well. But in Bolivia last week, Jose mentioned we were there. The Bolivia government is going to use a Washington Group Shortset, but will only use 4 of the questions. And I keep hearing this in discussions, and that's not good, because then you can't compare and you're leaving off important groups. And then, of course, capacity strengthening of stakeholders and exchange of information. I will talk about the examples being in Bolivia. So we had 2 trainings, one with deaf indigenous women, and that was with Pamela Molina, who was already mentioned from the World Federation of the Deaf. And then 35 organizations of persons with disabilities, different disability types from Bolivia on data advocacy. And some findings that I put together that I think are important to reflect upon, that data do not reflect the reality of the lives of people in the communities. We found that, first of all, it was only 4% persons with disabilities are living in Bolivia, and we know that is not true. It should be more like 16, 15%. But then also the reality was not reflected either. The basic concept around data were new for most participants, such as the difference between what are data and what are access to information. Most communities are collecting their own data, like Jose nicely said, but it isn't always accepted by the government, by the ministries. Most of the data being collected, especially the deaf Indigenous women, had never been collected before. So this was access to basic rights, including health, education, sex education, sign language rights, and just accessibility in general. And when OPD, organizations of persons with disabilities, do connect with the government, oftentimes there's a breakdown. For example, there was a website that was supposed to show data disaggregation by group, and it doesn't work. And it hasn't been working. And so I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but it's another barrier. And we had the groups create their own data advocacy action plan. So now we're really hoping they will follow up with that plan to advocate for better data in the government. And the last piece I'll say about this is I was a little surprised, but there was a lot of excitement around learning about data. We were a little nervous about giving a data training. It's not always so exciting, but there was a lot of excitement from the group. And so this just shows there's such a need for people to learn, and they want to learn more. And so I thought that was wonderful. And I will finish there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. A few takeaways there is basically, like, there are already some good practices that, for example, in that statistical operation where deaf people have been trained. And I think we should strive for this good practice to be the common practice rather than just like, proofs of concept. And obviously the emergencies, humanitarian situations, very much relevant now, where citizen data we can leverage on with the multiple and overlapping crisis that is happening. And just lastly, it's very refreshing to hear that, learning about data and then groups creating a data advocacy plan is something that is an enabling mechanism for a more well-inclusive data governance system. So thank you, Elizabeth. Now we go to the second to the last speaker, Linnea Haakanson, Senior Policy Advisor of RFSU, International Planned Parenthood Federation. So for a specific question to you, for citizen data pertaining to individuals, it is essential to have legal frameworks and regulations that address data privacy or ownership or control of their data collected from citizens. So given your advocacy and work, particularly in SRHR for all, what would be an important aspect to highlight in the implementation of the citizen data framework that will promote openness, usage, as well as protection of data?
Thank you so much. And just to start off, we're delighted to be here. I think this is such a enriching discussion. We have much to learn from each other. Just in the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat what colleagues said. Of course, from our perspective, data gathering is essential to address the gaps that we see when it comes to implementation and realization of SRHR across the globe. And also many times in our field, we find that correct data also has the power to debunk a lot of myths and misinformation about SRHR, and then also to ensure that access to SRHR services can really reach those that need it the most. So I'm not going to repeat what's already been said, but we agree on that, of course. There's also what's already been mentioned before. There's a great need for us to gather more data and to understand how we respond better with policies and programming, especially for groups and people who experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination in the sector as well. And then I think at the same time, we also have a huge opportunity now in this discussion with citizen data, and also what was described before about providing an enabling environment and creating trust for us to gather that data. And that's related to the right to privacy and also confidentiality. So what I wanted to highlight here today is firstly that the right to privacy and confidentiality and informed consent, that's really one of the pillar stones and cornerstones of SRHR. And we really need to make sure that that remains when we strive to collect more data as well. SRHR data, as I'm sure that many of you are aware, it's already very sensitive data. It's also health data, and in many contexts that, of course, receives special protection. And also, and if you think about it, they are some of the most intimate data sets that you can present about yourself, whether you have a sexually transmitted infection, the type of contraception you use, your sexual orientation and gender identity, and also whether you had an abortion or not. So this is very, very sensitive data, and we need to be mindful when we collect this, of course. And from our experiences, we have particularly seen that in the context of the rise of technology and also the use of technology in the sector to collect this kind of data, especially when you use apps, this can create some challenges, but also some opportunities for us to come together to really address how we can ensure the privacy of individuals providing this data as well. So, for example, we've seen the rise of apps that track menstruation, fertility, and other sensitive data about SRHR. But we've also seen that that's been collected that by mistake, that this data has been shared with major digital technology providers without the user's knowledge. So what's already been highlighted here today, it's important that individuals understand what the data will be used for and how it will be handled, but also that the persons involved that provided this data are in control of the data and can also be able to retract that data if circumstances change for them or if they live in contexts where, for example, regulations change for them. So what I wanted to underscore is that there are, of course, regulations out there already. We see on the regional level some guidelines that were already mentioned before are out there. Also, we have the GDPR on the European regional level, but of course, that's not applicable all over the world. But we would encourage really to look at those and how we can utilize those frameworks out there and regulations already to ensure that we can really provide that setting where data can be provided in a confidential manner, and also that we can then create the trust that's needed. I think also this is particularly important because what we see in our sector is that there is often an inherent asymmetry between digital technology providers and users, how that data is collected also. So what was mentioned before with AI, for example, we know that users that might provide their data might not always have an understanding on how that's going to be used, and it's a very complex system as well. So maybe it's also a good idea for us to think about together how we can communicate that and how that data is really being used in a layman's words, so that we don't have to have a PhD in machine learning to understand that. So of course, this requires investment in robust data governance teams, and also I think it was mentioned before, sort of building the capacity of teams in-house with NGOs, but also elsewhere, to enforce governance that defines responsible stakeholders, roles, goals, and tasks when it comes to handling this kind of sensitive data. But I think also to round up, I also wanted to conclude with emphasizing that I think this is a great opportunity for us to work across sectors and also to break down silos between us, because we have a lot to learn from each other. I think also having worked with this kind of data both from a private sector, my previous job, but also now at an NGO, I think we speak different languages, but I really think it's important. It's an opportunity for us to communicate because we have the same goals when it comes to the right to privacy and upholding that many times. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. I won't attempt to summarize because in the interest of time, I was told we will be kicked out by 11, even if we started a bit late. But yes, so I'll just give the floor to Francesca Perucci, who's the Director of Policy and Partnerships of Open Data Watch. So a specific question to you, because obviously with official statistics, the implementation is under the purview of the national statistical system. But now the question is more towards the implementation of the framework. How can we develop capacity development programs for citizen data? And what innovative approaches can we take to ensure that CSOs, communities, and citizens have the necessary technical support? And likewise, how can we promote, I think this is the ongoing discussion, how can we promote sustained financial support for citizens, communities, civil society organizations, and citizen science communities in producing citizen data? And lastly, what can the broader data community, beyond our community, statistical community or the citizens communities, do to support the development of citizen data? I know that's a lot of questions. Over to you, but I know you will definitely manage it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jessa. Great to be here. Thank you so much. the easy part now, right? Very easy. Well, I think the beauty of citizen data is the fact that they don't come simply from the government, right? The initiatives have to come from communities, from citizens, from the particular groups that feel undercounted, invisible in traditional data. But that's also the main challenge, because normally we have capacity development, we deal with governments. In our case, in statistics, we deal with national statistical offices or national statistical systems, and we create the partnership. In this case, we need to have everybody around the table, which was stressed many times by the previous speakers. So we need to ensure that everybody participates in the development of the initiatives and the capacity development programs. So how do we make that happen? I think that the Copenhagen framework has also a part, and we already explained that, what we call the roadmap, right, for the implementation. And I think there already we highlight some of the critical steps. But I would like to stress a few aspects of that, where we need to really focus and we really need to come together and do the work. Number one, we need to recreate the collaborative, what we have at the global level, at the regional, sub-regional, national, and sub-national level. And that's very important, because the collaborative is not there by accident. It's really crucial that all the partners, civil society representatives, representatives of the major groups, national statistical offices, all partners from international agencies, etc., they're all part of that, right? So we need to recreate that. That's, I think, one of the most important points. But then I think we need to make the clear links to the policy areas. We need, and we heard that again here, right? All the specific groups that, and we're not talking about disaggregating the data. We need to really work with the specific groups that have really tried to have their voice heard and to be represented in data. We also have a very important new work stream. I mean, it's not totally new, but I think it's a work stream that has gained momentum, and that's the work on intersectionality that really brings all these issues together, because all the groups that we heard today, they face multiple discrimination. So it's terribly important to look at this through the lens of intersectionality. So make the clear link to those organizations that already work on those elements, so that we can be effective. And we have a platform when we go to countries. And again, we don't go to countries, we go to communities. That's the challenge. So that's why we have to be very well rooted on the policy side. And the third point I want to make is identify clearly our references at the local level. So who are we dealing with? And have an entry point, right? Because we don't necessarily go through the government. It can be the UN country teams, for instance, that help us understand how to bring these different parts together. It can be the National Statistical Office. In some cases, they've been very sensitive to this, and they can create that. Can be a civil society network. You know, there are different, and that's the effort to try and understand what the entry point is. So that's where we are now. We're still refining. I think case studies are terribly important. We need to understand better how we can operate. So we have to allow some flexibility now until we are sure what the exact platform, you know, how it can work. So allow some flexibility now and be creative and try different approaches, and then sort of solidify the roadmap and define it better. Now, when it comes to funding, I think it's very much similar, right? The same approach to ensure that we are clear the type of the business case that we communicate to donors, right? It has to be clear how citizen data fits into the overall statistical system. They don't happen in isolation. They can be used in some cases by itself, but they can also be integrated. Yesterday we had a wonderful event on intersectionality, and the point was made several times that you need to bring all these different data sources together, right? So citizen data are very powerful, terribly important, but they need to be used together with, you know, innovative approaches to household surveys, new data sources. We even heard yesterday the power of private sector in some cases that can bring additional tools to supplement and to make citizen data even more powerful. So that's number one. And number two, again, link to the policy side and make sure we make this part of how you fill the data gaps on disability, how you fill the data gaps on refugees, etc. You know, and make the clear link. Your last point, Jessa, on how we ensure that the data community also works, you know, to make this happen. I think, again, I want to make 3 points here. Today, 3 is my lucky number. So, number 1, I think, legitimate. And I think we made a very important step with the framework being presented at the Statistical Commission and the Commission, although we don't need the endorsement per se, because this is, you know, somehow outside also the boundaries of the official statistical community, but it's so terribly important that the statistical community is on board, recognizes that this is a very powerful tool that they will want to use. So that's number 1. Number 2, establish the proper mechanism. Again, you know, the global data community can help link all these different agendas. And, you know, I already talked about intersectionality being a new, a sort of, you know, with new momentum type of approach that we can look at and link, trying to link all these different aspects and recreate, you know, the collaborative from global to regional and national, etc. And number 3, focus on impact. Citizen data are powerful because they are defined by the very same groups that want their needs to be visible and to be understood. So they're very powerful in the sense that they really can demonstrate impact and they can really have impact on policy and changes. So those are, I think, the 3 aspects that we can all collectively work on to make this advance, to make this agenda advance fast. Back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francesca. We'll keep in mind the 3s in the 3 questions, the 3 responses. But just my sincere apologies. We have allotted conceptually an open discussion of question and answer, but there is supposedly a meeting that is happening at 11 o'clock and we will be kicked out sometime soon. So my plea to everyone, I mean, if you have specific questions to our specific speakers, please do approach them. For those in the chat, please do type them and we'll get back to you even after the event. But just also mindful that there are also other side events that you might have to go to. So with that being said, I give the floor to Ms. Kira. I have difficulty pronouncing it, but I'll just mention the last name, Kira Appel, Director of International Affairs, Ministry for Gender Equality from the Government of Denmark. Over to you, Kira.
Good morning to everybody, delegates, organizers, fellow advocates, and not least the excellent panelists. First and foremost, I really want to extend my thanks to the organizers, the stakeholder group of persons with disabilities for sustainable development, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, the International Civil Society Center, Open Data Watch, the Danish Institute for Human Rights, UNDESA, Statistics Division, and UN Women. Your dedication to promoting inclusivity and advancing the rights of citizens in transforming sex-disaggregated data ecosystems is truly commendable. And that's why I'm mentioning all these names, because I wish to highlight the importance of all of you. And especially also, of course, to UN Women and UNSD for coordinating and bringing us together with the esteemed panelists. Today's discussion really holds a profound importance for Denmark. We strive to promote non-state actors' engagement and contributions to strengthen our processes through data value chains. We have a long-standing tradition for basing our decisions on data. We have many independent research institutions with which private and state actors use to inform their work and not least to monitor developments. For instance, the National Research and Analysis Center for Welfare, VIVE, in collaboration with the disability organizations and the Danish Institute for Human Rights, has gathered data on the living conditions on people with disabilities. Through comprehensive surveys conducted in 2012, 16, and 20, Vive has provided insights into the challenges faced by this community. And this data has been instrumental in the development of the Disability Barometer, a groundbreaking tool that combines qualitative and quantitative data to monitor the realization of rights amongst the people with disabilities in Denmark. Similar data from independent researchers has informed my government's work on gender equality in a more broad term, on violence against women, labor market, education, well, data concerning our whole society. So I am delighted to witness the development so far, initiated by bringing state and non-state actors together onto a platform via the Collaborative on Citizen Data. The seeds have been sown. I can see maybe a little bit of trees growing, and I can't wait to see a thriving forest. I anticipate these preliminary yet profound steps will enable strong commitments on citizen data at various global discussions that involve civil groups and societies. For instance, we can initiate coalitions on citizen data to steer work on this important thematic area at the Summit of the Future, as well as to the Pact for the Future. I wish, so through the commitment to citizen data, we can all play a pivotal role in advancing the rights and dignity of women, leaving no one behind. Data is simply the first step to action. So let's reaffirm our commitment to supporting initiatives that promote citizen data ecosystems. The government of Denmark stands ready, and we look forward to collaborating with all our partners to create a more inclusive and equitable world for all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kira. And I think that closes us in a very high note of promise, of aspirations, and likewise an inspiring message. I think all of us here, we heard the plea. There's so many global discussions upcoming. The Summit for the Future. Please make the voice for our advocacy for citizen data. And thank you once again, and look forward to your future engagement, likewise, or sustained engagement of citizen data. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well,